All right, and we are live. So, good afternoon, everyone. Happy Wednesday, and welcome to our July webinar series on Hoshin Kanri, which is a fantastic planning tool that I love to use to plan everything from large strategic plans in big organizations all the way down to a personal plan that I actually use for myself. And we're going to be walking through a bunch of those here today and talk about what went well, what didn't go well, how do you feel went out. And I think the most important part of this is understanding how to use it at the end for yourself personally, because we all can't have the influence over the entire organization to have it implemented across the board. But if we definitely can start small with ourselves, that success continues to grow. And you'll find that people will start asking questions on how you're getting things done. And once you start sharing your documents. So I know that that will absolutely happen as we go. Let me just answer Randy's question here. So if we are on mute automatically, or do you need to click somewhere? You are all on mute automatically. So if at any point you want to add to the conversation, you can either chat with us, and Jen will be monitoring the chat, as will I, or you can let us know that you'd like to talk to ask a question, and we will unmute your line, and then you can jump on the webinar with us as well. So there's a couple different ways. You can also use the Q&A function as well. So there's lots of fun ways that you can get in touch with us as we go today. And that's why Jen and I do this as tag team, so we can make sure that we hit up all your questions as we go. So great questions. All right. So what we do from a joint pivot perspective, we do a lot of work as it comes to process improvement. So anything related to Lean and Six Sigma, that type of process improvement, the change management that goes along with it, the project management component of it, the leadership development and personal and professional performance coaching, and then anything to do with strategic planning. Because Jen and I know a lot about people, process, and systems, and we know that there's not a great way to do that unless you've got expertise in all of those areas of people, process, and systems. So
Mhm.
we've had the luck over our careers to be able to work in multiple different industries, both in manufacturing as well as in professional and service industries, to understand how a lot of these tools can be applied and used and modified and changed to match the complexity of the problems within your different organizations. So what Jen and I love to do is get in, partner with your organizations, figure out what the root cause of the issues are that you're trying to solve, or what opportunities are out there, and then help to put together plans to help solve those or address that opportunity. And we're happy to jump in there, either training your staff, or if you just want to use us for a short bit to come in and help get you kickstarted, we are open to either of those. And we've been having a lot of fun at it. Just about almost, I think, 9 months now, right, Jen?
It's 9 months. I
I
quoted
know,
yesterday.
right? I know we call it our little baby all the time, but it actually is now our little baby.
It's like my children that's going to walk around 14, 15 months, but
There you go. Perfect. Awesome. We have a milestone. Do we get cake? No.
y- yes, I'll make it.
Perfect. All right. Wonderful. So what we do essentially is we'll come in, help you with the doing, whether it's running your strategic planning sessions, running the mapping sessions, doing the project management. We love doing that. We also love teaching and training. And whether that's constructing training for you, delivering the training, creating and crafting specific training for your org based on your cultural needs, based on the current state assessments, we are happy to do that as well. And then also available for speaking. Both Jen and I love getting up in front of groups of people to talk about some of these issues, talk about where we've done well, where we've failed, what we've learned from it,
Mhm.
and all the time that we're speaking, trying to make sure that you're walking away with actionable items that you can use right away when you walk through that session.
Mhm.
All right. So a few learning objectives for today. The first one is to, one, understand how to implement the Hoshin Kanri strategic planning process, either in your organization, maybe it's just for your small team, or maybe it's just for yourself that you might want to use it. So we'll talk through about how you get started with that. We'll talk through the benefits and some of the lessons learned, because this did not all go smoothly. And each organization or each person has their own hiccups as we go through the process on what works well and what hasn't. But we'll share those with you and how we overcame them on implementing Hoshin Kanri. We'll also go through and look at the approach that we took at a couple of different organizations and how we deployed strategic planning, sometimes using Hoshin Kanri, sometimes using components or pieces of it, but then how we changed it to help it make it more manageable within that org, and then how we've used it personally. And then have a roadmap and a template for you to use with your teams. So in the email that comes at the end of the day today, we'll have the link to this recording in it. It will also have a link to the full presentation from today, and it will also have the Excel template that we use. And in that Excel template, there are two examples in there, one professional example, and you'll actually get a edited down portion of my personal example. So you'll see some of the stuff that I'm working on in 2020, and you'll be able to use that for yourself as well. And then we want you also to walk away with a good understanding on how you can use the X matrix or Hoshin Kanri to help ease the load both for the employee and leader. So I know we've got some people on here who we've been talking with quite a bit about goal setting. And for those of you that we've been talking about goal setting, this might be a good opportunity to think about how we could use some of this information, even the concepts or the glossary that we're going to talk through, how we can use that in the goal setting process for sure. All right. So the first thing is, what actually is Hoshin Kanri? So in Japanese, as with most lean terms, Hoshin means shining metal compass or pointing a direction, and Kanri means management or control. So in this case, specifically, this name suggests Hoshin is planning aligns with the organization towards accomplishing a single goal. Now, if you're anything like the experience I've had in many of my past organizations, they don't love the Japanese terms. So we've got a couple different ways that we call it. You'll hear me interchange X matrix. You'll hear me call it a strategy document. We'll show you what makes it Hoshin Kanri, and really essentially running towards anything that means aligning everybody towards one goal or plan is essentially, in essence, that Hoshin Kanri aspect of it. Jen, will you want to share anything about your time at Toyota about Hoshin Kanri?
It was we did use the word Hoshin constantly. Part of the way we did things, right? Everything always came back to the plan, and it was brought up constantly, and goals were on there. It was black and white, and it was our roadmap to success with no gray area.
Right?
Extremely valuable.
Awesome. It is. It's a wonderful tool.
Mhm.
All right, so what exactly is Hoshin Kanri for us? So this discipline that we put out as in our X matrix or Hoshin Kanri form is really intended to help the organization, one, focus on that shared goal. And once you have those shared goals across the organization, it's a lot easier to communicate that goal to all leaders. I've been in some organizations where it's been very clear these are the top 3 to 5 goals that everybody is working on. They were cascaded down within the organization, and then everybody had to be doing something to help solidify or make progress on that specific goal. There's been other organizations that I have been at that you might have a mission at the very, very top, and then each function has all of their different goals. And really, this discipline is to help make sure that everybody's working towards the same direction and that same goal, and everybody understands what they're doing on a daily basis and what impact that has on the organization as a whole. So it helps us to involve all of the leaders and all of their employees in the planning process to help them achieve their goals for sure, because you have that personal component in it to help identify what specific things you can do to be able to help contribute to that mission. And just the visual format of the Hoshin Kanri tool allows you to basically tie together the breadcrumbs to figure out how you can actually impact your mission or your vision for that year. I know for me, I had a hard time in a lot of organizations where they would say, we want to be best in class XYZ. And I'd be like, I have no idea how I can personally impact that overall goal in the organization. But once I started breaking it down using the Hoshin Kanri concepts, I could say, I'm doing A, B, and C to help impact that specific goal. It was very good for me to be able to tie back specifically the tasks that I was doing, that it made me feel much more like I had an impact on the overall organization and their overall success. It also helps because it helps to hold the participants accountable for achieving their part of the plan. So if you have trouble with goal setting, or some people use this for metrics planning and merit increases to help show what people actually need to get done at the end of the year and how they're measuring it, to make sure that we're working on the right things.
Well, and Julie,
Oh,
you're making
yep.
it like an equation, right?
Yeah.
To predictable results.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, here's all of your inputs, so you know what you can expect, and potentially adjust along the way.
Exactly. Exactly. It's so funny because I even look at it for this year. COVID has thrown a curveball into many organizations at this point where we're causing ourselves to readjust. And I pulled my personal one back out, of course, and I was like, okay, so what do I do with this now that this has hit? And it made it a lot easier because I was like, all right, this one's impacted, this one's impacted, this one's impacted. And now I need to find different action items to go support these couple goals that I had because I need to attack them from a different way. So it was a lot easier to go back through and do some of that scenario planning. 100% correct, Jen. Fantastic. All right. So Hoshin Kanri or X matrix. A Hoshin table can take many different forms. I've chosen in my career in the past to call it the X matrix instead of Hoshin Kanri. Like I had mentioned earlier, I've worked for a few organizations that just do not love using the Japanese terms for things. They just want it more simplistic. And even when I called it the X matrix once, I had one group that was like, no, it's still too much. And then they're like, you know what? It actually looks like a pinwheel. And I was like, awesome, perfect. At that company, I was like, that shall be what we call it now because they came up with the name for it. They understood it. And it reminded them, and I actually have mine here today, when you read it, you basically turn it like a pinwheel. So I wish we were doing this in person because usually I give out pinwheels at this time in the presentation. But you can name it whatever it is that you want, as long as you've got the sentiment behind it and you're getting to the outcomes that you need to get. I'm not a big stickler on whatever it is that you want to call it, but for our terms, we'll essentially be using either Hoshin Kanri, X Matrix, or Pinwheel here today. Jen, did you ever have any fun names for this one, or were you guys pretty strict?
We were pretty lame. That's what it is. Ocean.
There you go. All right. Well, we'll bring some fun back in your life, Jen. Awesome. All right, so there's a couple different paths. We're going to go through the business one first and then the personal one second. And we'll walk through some of the things that worked well and didn't work well, and I'll try and tie in who we were working with at what point during that session. So for us, the path for strategic planning as we related to Hoshin started off at the very top level with our senior management team, which was identifying what the mission was for the overall organization. That could be your mission, it could be your values, it could be maybe what you're telling the board is your goals or your 3 to 5 year vision that you have for the organization, which in turn, once you take that, you break down into your strategies. So mission is set usually up by that executive team. From that mission, you come up with essentially strategies, like 3 to 5 year strategies. And then those are typically created within your executive level into your middle management level, some of your director level, maybe your VP level at that point. And then those strategies are then broken down into objectives. And those objectives are typically usually like a 1 year goal at that point. And based on that objective, you come up with very specific goals for each of those objectives that you want to achieve. And then the action items are what help you achieve your goals. And when you start getting down to the objective level, the goal level, and the action item level is where you actually start working on things as individuals and teams. But it's nice because then you can actually work the process backwards and figure out exactly how every single one of your action items supports your strategy or your mission. But you can see where the different groups kind of come in here because we'll go through 3 different levels of how we've used Hoshin in business and where you can kind of play in that area. And you don't always have to start from the top. So if you are somebody who's thinking about using this and let's say you just run maybe a team of 5 to 10 people and you want to use Hoshin within your group, but the rest of your organization doesn't use it, or it's not the strategic planning tool that your executives use, that's totally fine. My guess is you probably could figure out what the missions and strategies were that your organization is giving to you, and you can say, all right, these are our 1 year objectives. These are the goals we need to achieve this year, and here are the action items that we need to get this done. So don't at all worry if this isn't done across your organization. You can plug and play this in anywhere you need to. As long as you have the inputs to it, you can put the outputs there.
I had the exact experience where our previous company didn't have. I don't have anything nice to say.
They just didn't have, no.
Um, for my function that I was responsible for, we were easily able to break it down so everyone understood what our roadmap
Hmm.
was. And it took us on a very visual journey, and we could demonstrate how we were crushing it to everyone else very easily.
Exactly. Did you find yourself in that situation, Jen, where other people coming to you and going like, how did you get that plan? Where did that plan come from?
Yes. And they're like, where, who, how? And it's like, well, I created it. I can show you how. And depending on the culture of the company and the experience of that individual, sometimes it turned into a conversation,
Sure.
carry over information. And sometimes it was, I just like plugging and shooting from the hip constantly. And that's not,
Exactly. Oh, it's always fun. The things we learn along the way.
yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll go into level 1 here then. And level 1 is when we started with our senior leaders. So if you follow along, you start at the pink corner of our pinwheel and you identify your strategies. You figure out how the strategies tie to your objectives, how they might tie to your teams, and actually mission comes before strategy. So I actually started at the wrong spot there. So start at the yellow. Start with your mission, then your strategies, your objectives, and then your teams. So what we're going to do, we're going to show you just a quick example of this. So I've got these all at the end too with actual data populated in here. So if you're somebody who needs to see exactly how it's done, there are examples at the end of the presentation with all of this filled in instead of just placeholders. So the first thing at that senior level that you're going to take a look at is your mission statement. So your mission, and that could be some of the values that you have, it could be your mission statement, it could be your vision, is what are the components of that that you want to strive for. So it could be safety, it could be commitment, it could be best in class when it comes to training, but that might be what your missions are from an organization. You then go through and tie in what are the strategies that help you achieve those different missions. So if you have something like safety, for example, as one of your core values as it comes to your mission statement, you might have some strategies to say, in the next 3 to 5 years, we intend to have best in class safety features um, installed on all of our equipment. And that could be a strategy. And at that point, you could look at it and say, okay, for an objective for the year, we might want to make sure that if we say 100% of our equipment has that, maybe by the end of year 1, you want to reach 30% from that perspective. And 30% of your equipment has that safety equipment tied into it. And then from a team's perspective, you would then identify which teams would be needed in order to reach those specific objectives or might be tied up in projects that work on them. So I know what you're saying. This looks interesting. It kind of looks like a crossword puzzle, Julie. And that answer is correct. It does look like a crossword puzzle. But let me explain where that comes from there. So this is one of the most powerful tools as part of Hoshin that I love to do. And that is going through and filling out these relationship boxes. So for us, that black box, when you're looking at the correlations there, that means that there is a strong impact or strong relationship between that mission or that strategy or that objective. If it's gray, that means that there might be a mild relationship or mild impact between those two. And if it's white, that means that there is no impact there. So if we say our mission is to be, best in class when it comes to safety, and then our strategy in our first box there is to have 100% of our equipment have new safety features installed, the relationship between achieving that mission of safety and the strategy of putting in the safety equipment and all of your equipment is very strong. So that would be a strong black relationship there that you would fill in with that black shading, because that shows if you work on that specific strategy, it's having an impact on your mission. And then if you go to the objective box and you say in year 1, our objective is to get to 30% of our equipment to having those safety features. And if you're getting to that 30%, how that ties to the strategy of in 3 to 5 years having 100% of your equipment have those safety features in, that is also a strong relationship there. Some other examples on where like maybe a gray relationship could come in there is, let's say that you have an objective to replace some of the equipment within your organization. So putting in place a new procedure that would red tag out old equipment. And that procedure of red tagging out old equipment might have a mild impact on you being able to achieve best in class, because through that red tag process, you might be identifying some of the equipment that needs to be exited out of the organization because it's not safe. So while it's not directly tied to getting all of these safety fixtures on new equipment, it might have an indirect impact on that because it might identify areas that you weren't even thinking of. So that is where those relationship boxes come into play. I'll jump into the objectives and teams there. When we talked about who would actually work on those objectives, when you look at the teams across the side here, those would be the teams that would be working on those projects. Anybody who would be a black box when it comes to that team means that they're working directly on that project. Anybody who's a gray box maybe means that they're a secondary team member, or they might need to provide a little bit support, but they're not the main components or primary leaders of that specific project. And then I sometimes like to take it one step further. So you see on the side here where we've got our resources of John, Sue, Andy, and Pat. Those might be either the vice presidents at this level when we talk about senior leaders, the vice presidents who might be in charge of those specific objectives for that year. So then it's very, very clear for those senior leaders who is the executive sponsor on that specific objective. So when we talked about being able to hold people accountable, that is one of those key areas where this matrix really shows it into one page so people can very clearly understand who is responsible for what. So our basic steps that we look at from a leader perspective, that senior leader, that first one is to fill in your mission or directions or values, whatever it is that you call them. We've seen them creep around. It used to just be you saw a mission statement or a vision statement. And now we see missions, we see directives, we see a strategic house, we might see a value statement, whatever that highest level of direction that your company has, that goes into the very, very first box. From that, you go through and you identify what your strategies or goals are. And again, those strategies or goals could be like 3 years out. I usually think 3 years is a good estimate to kind of get a good clue of where you want to go, but you're not looking as short term as 1 year. So identify what your strategies or goals are. Then you want to complete those relationship boxes between your mission and values and your strategies. Your third step then is to go through and determine your objectives or your actions. And those are your 1 year items that you need to get done. And then complete those relationship boxes between your objectives and your strategies. And then the last step is to define what those responsibilities were, who is actually getting assigned to them, what teams is going to be working on them, and who is your executive sponsor. And then you'll fill in those same relationship boxes as well. All right, so what didn't work well with our senior leaders? Well, walking in with them and sharing the X matrix with them without giving them any proof did not work very well. In a lot of cases, there's some good, solid strategic planning processes out there. A lot of people are very comfortable with whatever strategy planning process they have currently. And I remember when I first started using this strategy, I was so excited about it that I almost couldn't contain the words that I wanted to tell and explain about it, that I just walked in and it was like, this is great. This is awesome. We need to use this. And if you can imagine the response I got, I think I was maybe 25 or 26 years old at the time, walking into a room of very well-seasoned leaders, and they're like, Jules, what you doing? So walking in with no proof on it, not so great. And then if you were to go and just give them this is what a final one looks like, and you put it in front of them and say that this is great, that didn't work either, because that is just plain scary. To look at it on a sheet without any context, you don't know how to read it, you don't know how it works. So expecting them to just get it, not the right plan. It did not work either, giving them a blank template and sending them off with some instruction and not doing something first with them. So what we ended up doing there, and we'll talk about this in the what went well with them, is going through one together. So we built one out together for one of the teams so they could actually see how it got filled in. We all felt comfortable with it. And then they started to go off on their own and work and try on their own with a little assistance. Um, and what also didn't work well was just starting with a blank slate. So I did learn that if you want to give this to senior leaders and you already know what the mission and values are, and you might know what the yearly strategies or 3 to 5 year strategies are, fill them in yourself and then give them the template, because those are 2 sections then that they don't have to worry about filling in. And they feel much more comfortable with it for sure. What did work well with my senior leaders, lots of pictures. So the more I could show them specific ties between the different objectives. So I used in fact here, a simple non-business example, a full set of plans for them so that they could see for a fake company or a fake initiative that we were trying to do. Actually, this was one example that I used in my personal life, where they could see the mission all the way down to like weekly action plans that I needed to get done. It only had 3 or 4 things in, but it was enough for them to be able to understand how things worked from start to finish. If you are really interested in doing some of this stuff and you want one of those full sets of plans in a non-business example, just reach out to Jen or I. We are happy to share those with you if that's something that you want to be able to use. And then also bring feedback from employees on why and how this will help. So being able to show how this actually ties to employee engagement and how much more purposeful the goals and objectives that people are working on and how they help achieve the missions or values of the company is a great way to work on selling this. Because when you start having people know that they are there for a reason and what they do is really valuable, that will boost your engagement scores up quite a bit, and you'll see better profits and more outcome from that. And then also walk in with confidence. So the more swag you have coming in, the swagger you've got coming in when it comes to strategic planning and using the X matrix, the better off you're going to be. Instead of, hey, I think this might work. Walk in there, show them how you've used it on your own, give them some case studies, and share a story with them on how this has worked. All right. So if we talk about our progression here, so we'll talk about how senior leaders use it, then our team leaders, and then our employees. So the next level down that we talk about, you're essentially just turning the pinwheel once, where our strategies then feed into our start point, our strategies for our team leaders. And when we get down to employees, we'll see how those objectives that we've identified flow into the objectives for employees as well. So if I look at our next level here, you'll see that the mission and values came off. And instead, we replaced some of our teams with goals, and we've replaced some of the targets that we have there with individuals. So now we have the strategies that are the 3 to 5 year strategies. We have our objectives, which might be our year-long objectives that we want to target. We might have goals as a team that we want to be able to attack. And then we might have individual goals or individuals that we want to make sure that we are addressing. So this starts to go down one level. So if I look at our same example here, we have our strategy, our objective, our goal, and then our individuals. And you see our people here has moved from metrics or targets. They used to be over here and they've moved into this blue slot. And replacing them in that slot is metrics or targets that we're trying to achieve. So now we're starting to put in some of that, some of those examples where we can actually tie data right to the specific goals and objectives at that point. So if we go back to our example that we had there of safety. So we said 3 to 5 years, the plan is to have 100% of our equipment have specific safety features on that. Our objectives for the year might have been to get 30% of the equipment to have those specific safety features on them. The goals maybe for, let's say, our maintenance group might have been, the goal number 1 was to look at all of the outer components of a specific piece of equipment. So that might have been a goal for them. And then across that, they might have said that there's a specific piece of that that John might look at, maybe Sue might look at, maybe Andy might look at it. And some of the metrics that they're going to be measuring on that might be the percent complete of how many pieces of equipment they've actually looked at from the outside. So you can see this is where it's starting to get into more detail. in this situation. There's more granularity, that you know that these are specific actions that you can take in order to achieve those strategies. So very similar to the same basic steps that we had done previously, you're going to copy your strategies from your high level, level 1 that we just looked at. Copy those strategies over, and then you're going to copy over any applicable objectives. So 2 of the components are actually already filled in for you. So this next level down is a little bit easier. So your objective now as a team is then to try and figure out what applicable goals that you guys want to achieve as a function or a team in order to support those specific yearly objectives that that the company has come up with. And then the last part of that then is to assign the responsibility and metrics and targets for each of those. You can very well have multiple people working on the same goal. That doesn't mean that there's only one project that supports that goal. You could have multiple projects supporting a specific goal across the board, and each person might have their own project that they're working on. And in the next layer of our pinwheel, you'll start to see what are the action items that people need to do in order to complete that specific goal. So very similar steps as the same way we did the previous one. Put in your strategies, get your objectives in there, put your goals in, and then assign on your team who is going to be the primary owner of each of those specific goals that might be working on components of it. So what didn't work well with our team leads? Same thing with our executive leadership team. Sending them off without help was treacherous. So the more that we could do the first one with them, and we did essentially a do together and then some teaching component of it, and then having them do it on their own, that seemed to work out really well, really well. And then I did learn too, if I didn't write out a script on why we were doing this and how we were doing it, and I left interpretation up to the team leaders to explain how the process worked. As fun as some of the answers were as to how this worked and why, it's probably best to have somebody go in there and help explain the what's and the whys, do the change management component of it, or give some training or some FAQs or talking points. Prepare your leaders for that so that they don't have to fumble through that conversation. And then also for the team leaders, I had a couple that didn't want to involve their team in filling out the X matrix. So they filled it out for their team and just gave it to them, which did not really work out so well. This is meant to be a team exercise. It's meant to bring everybody together in understanding what they can do as a team to pull together and figure out what they can do to impact the vision and mission and strategies of the company, and be allowed to participate in what their goals are going to be for the next year. So just having the leader sit down and fill it in and hand it back to me was not a real great way for that to happen.
No, and it ties into the individual knowing that everything they do and why they show up to work means
Mm-hmm.
something, right? And can get them more pumped up about what they're doing every day.
100% done. Fantastic. All right. So what did work well with our teams, with our team leaders? One, facilitate that first session with them. Going in and helping them set it up, at least doing like a half an hour, 45 minutes with them, and maybe they can handle the last hour and a half to 2 hours that they would be going through putting this together, doing that first session with them. So they had a safe environment to practice in, they felt supported, and they knew what they needed to do next. I also did share a simple, again, non-business example and a full set of plans so that those people who need to see what the end game looks like, they were able at that point to see where we were going with it. And it was almost then turned into an exercise of filling in the blanks. It was very helpful to bring that whole team together. So if we could bring in the leader and all of the employees on the team together to be able to fill out the X matrix, that worked out really good. We had a very, very participatory group because of the fact that almost everybody who we did this with was glad that they were asked to be involved in the planning process, because most of them felt that their goals were just given to them. And this was a great opportunity for them to figure out what they were on their own and be able to work through those. And then the last one was, again, just confidence. Go in there like you know what you're doing with it. Even if you don't know 100% of the time, just go in there and be confident about it, and they'll follow you, because you're going to find bumps in the road in this. It's not going to work 100% of the time. It's not going to ever be super easy as you go through. We all learn every single time we do these. I can't tell you, like, every single time I have run one of these sessions, I've learned something new about the tool that I didn't know about before, or somebody throws me a curveball that I have never experienced, and we've had to figure out how do we work around it. And all of that is totally normal. So know that if you do start running this, it's not going to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. Hoshin in itself is a living document that continually gets updated. So it's fine. It's not something you do once and let it sit. You keep going on this stuff. All right, so then we get into our level 3 here, and that's the progression then from our team leaders to our employees. So this is the component where at the first pace of it was our senior leaders, our executive team, identifying mission and values for the company. Then they're cascading that down to the team or functional leads to be able to say, hey, these are what our strategies and objectives are. What are you going to do in order to impact these? And the team will come up with a plan. And this is the time where then the team leader gets to sit down with each individual employee and say, okay, employee, what are you going to do to help impact the success of our specific team? So this is where we can go in now and start with the objectives. We're going to put the goals in place. And now we're going to put in action items for each individual person to achieve. And that could be, if you're familiar with the EOS process, it could be your 90-day rocks that you're putting in there. If you like to do like 1 month projects, or you like to do blitzes, or if you're in an agile world where this could be a sprint that you need to get done, those would be what's put in the action items perspective there. And then we've got our due dates and metrics as to how we are holding people accountable and keeping ourselves on track. So again, ultimately, that leader and the employee goes from objectives to goals and action items, and then due dates and metrics. And the same thing with the last one. You pull the objectives and your goals right from the pinwheel before this. So our objectives now have moved into this red spot. They were over here in this 2 spot, and our goals have moved from the green spot to the orange spot. Our action items are now where we are starting. So your orange and your red should be the same, coming from the last X matrix. And now you're starting to think about specific action items that you need to get done. So if we remember our example before, we had talked about being best in class when it came to safety, with 100% of the equipment that had updated safety features on that. We knew that our strategy was to be able to get 100% of that done in 3 to 5 years. Our objective for the year was to get 30% of that completed. From a goal perspective for this team, we said we wanted to get, I think, the outside of all of the outside of the equipment, specific equipment inspected, and that was a goal. Now, for an action item, you might now break that up into, we're going to say we want you looking at all of the external drive components. We want another person looking at all of the let's say steel components in it, and you can break it up from that perspective. And each of those different action items can then impact that specific goal. So somebody then might have, okay, for action item 1, that's going to be, let's say, a 90-day rock or a project for me for the next quarter, to be able to identify and inspect all of, let's say, the steel components on the external part of that piece of equipment across the board. And that is my action item that I need to get done in the next 3 months. We are going to put metrics in place here that we can manage and monitor how much of that is actually complete. Maybe we're looking at our pass-fail rate on it to see how well we're doing on it and how much equipment we think might be needed to replace. And then you'll see these metrics moved over from here over to our blue boxes. And then now we have our target as to when we actually want to get this work done. So we've broken it up into quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you can start to identify then exactly what quarter each of these action items needs to be done by. So then it's almost your full yearly plan, like this one I have here. This is a full year plan for me, so that I know exactly what I need to get done every quarter in order to achieve my values and my goals for that year. So very similar basic steps with this. You're going to copy your applicable objectives or create new objectives if need be. and then copy your goals over from the previous X matrix that you had done. Define the action items or tasks, and this is where you're sitting down with the employees, and this isn't one that you dictate all the stuff that they need to get done. This is a two-way conversation that you're having with your employees to say, what would you like to get done this year? What's driving you in this situation? How can we both help to make sure that we achieve the goals of the organization going forward? And then the last component of that is to identify what metrics or targets you want to achieve, and then some due dates along with them. So very, very similar steps. Like once you get one done, it's real easy to get the rest of them done. And don't worry, I've got examples here to show you on how to make this easier. So what didn't work well in the conversation with leaders and employees? Well, one, it was really awkward sitting in with them. So at this point, the leaders have probably been introduced to this by their executive team and have gone through the pinwheel once. And then we have gone through and had the conversation with the leaders and their team together. So that's probably the second time they've done and gone through it. Me sitting in with them another time just got awkward. So you're not going to be busting up in a one-on-one conversation between a leader and their employee. At this point, they're probably good to go on their own, unless they say, hey, Julie, can you come help me out today? I just want to make sure that we're doing this right. Would you mind sitting in with Jen and I as we go through this? And then you're totally fine. But just randomly inviting yourself in or saying, hey, I'm going to be part of everyone's personal development this year is not the most comfortable way to do this. All right. One, not tying it in with goal setting. So if you're doing this and you're not tying it to, let's say, any goals that you might have for the year in a performance management system, or if you get like merit-based pay or incentive comp, if you're not tying these two together, you're missing a huge opportunity, because it's great to be able to push those two together and have one document to be able to lead from. And then also having them fill it in on their own. I also, again, had one leader who basically gave a blank copy to their employees and then asked their employees to fill it in and give it back to them. That didn't work so well. So make sure that it's a joint conversation there that you were having doing it together. They're certainly welcome. You might want to challenge them to come to the meeting with ideas on what they would like to work on, but you're going to fill in the document together. You're not going to send it to them and have them do it on their own and not have any two-way conversation with them.
No, and Julie, something to add there, like way back in my days at Toyota, the goals were given to the functions, right?
Yeah.
Reduce $10 per vehicle and transportation cost.
Mm-hmm.
It was divided amongst packaging, logistics, and other functions, departments under the function. And it was extremely challenging, but also very rewarding, because we were given the opportunity to figure out, how am I going to save $10?
Right?
Let me actually go and get creative and work with, my partners in other groups, or our suppliers, or, packaging vendors, to brainstorm how to get it. And we had so much ownership
Totally.
in that $10. Now, when we didn't hit it, it wasn't fun, but everyone knew along the way how we were tracking, because we fell back to this template to continue to communicate exactly what we were doing and what we had achieved or what we missed.
Yeah. And how much buy-in and engagement do you feel you had because of the fact that you knew exactly how you tied in there?
It was 100%.
Yeah.
And it was a challenging environment, because the pressure was on, but we owned it,
Yeah.
right? Oh, it was so cool to, especially when you won, you're like, I just accomplished $10. Sounds so small, but when you're making 2,200 Camrys a day,
Yeah. Right? Huge deal. I'll take it.
Yeah, it was.
Heck, I'd just take the $10.
Correct.
Awesome. No,
Yeah.
great example. Thank you, Jen. What worked well with our leaders and employees? One, using it as a learning opportunity. So if we presented it as, hey, this is a tool to help you stretch your strategic muscle, maybe there was a competency tied to it that we wanted to help them learn and understand, or to help grow future leaders, the way that we could tie it to a learning example was great. Again, a simple non-business example that they could look at, which is why the personal one is so important. If we had another individual goal plan for them to look at, I think that was good for them as well, so they could see good examples. I always actually try to have the leaders have their individual one set up so that the leaders can share their individual goal plan with their employees, so that the employees can then see that the leader is walking the walk and talking the talk as well. and it probably means a little bit more. You make yourself as a leader a little bit more vulnerable to share what your goals are with your employees as well. And then, like we talked about, filling it in together, both from the employee and the leader perspective. The next two slides are going to be examples that are going to be very hard to see on this screen, but I left them in the presentation so that when you do get a copy of it, you can look at ones that are completely done in these next two cases. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on them, but I'll just set them up for you so you can take a look. And it looks really scary on the screen. And again, we promise it's not scary once you start digging into it. This was a situation where we were doing IT strategic planning across the board. So when we go through and we identified some of the common themes that we were hearing from what we needed our systems to be able to do, and then how we were going to be able to get our systems to do that, and then what projects we actually needed to be able to do in order to achieve those goals, and then how they actually impacted the different groups that we were looking at and the directions we had from a company. So you'll be able to dig into that example. So this would be what we consider a level 1, that high level view. And this should be familiar to a few people who are on this call here, where we are looking at, these were the goals. This was our X matrix that we had for a project management office, where we knew what our goals were 3 to 5 years out. So this is what we would consider a level 2. So this would be the leaders along with their teams, where we had our 3 to 5 year plans here, or 3-year plans. Then we had our goals as well of what we wanted to get done from the PMO perspective. Then we had, this was our team objectives that we needed to get done. And then these were the tasks, our action plans that needed to be completed. So you'll be able to look through that one in the presentation too. But the part that I'm most excited about here and putting this together was the path for personal planning. Because if you can implement this in a business, totally fine. But you can absolutely use this in your personal life as well. You just change the verbiage around a little bit. And I loved being able to update this. For those of you who do not know, in the Joint Pivot world, I'm working on getting my executive coaching certification. And a big part of that coaching is understanding what you're doing to help impact your values in a fantastic way. And whether that's personal or whether that's professional, what are you doing to be able to work on that? So I actually updated mine when I went through my first training class back in April. And took a peek at it again when we started putting together the presentation for this to see where I was at it and see what needed to change. So you're going to go through and identify what your values are, what your goals are, what action items you need to get done, how you're going to measure yourself with the metrics, and what does the timing look like. So I wanted to share my actual personal Hoshin with you to see if it could inspire some of you to help put together some of your own personal action plans with this. So again, personal plans, what are your values first? Then you're going to identify what your goals are. Then you're going to understand what action items you need to do to get those goals completed, and then what due dates or metrics you'll need to be able to see. So same thing that we saw previously, your values are moving down into your red slot, your goals move into your orange, your action items move into your green, and your metrics move into your blue. And then I had my timing of my quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4 here over on the side. So same basic steps as we took previously. So identify and fill in what your core values are. If you don't know what those are, give me a call. We'll help figure them out. There's a fun assessment we can do for that one. And then identify what your yearly goals are to have an impact on your core values. Then determine what your action items are to impact your yearly goals. And then get your metrics and your due dates out there to help hold yourself accountable. So let's take a look. This is actually my personal plan here. So this is my 2020 plan. I joked because I pulled my old one out. Jen, I wish I should have put it in here, but it was too embarrassing. I put one of these together 15 years ago, or actually it was more than 15 years. It was, I think, 2002, 2003. It's completely embarrassing. But there was stuff in there like get a house, find a husband, be a director, make 100K, like all this type of stuff. One of them actually was to be a VP before I turned 40. So I did that. I just had to create my own company to do it, but I did it. But there's a lot of really embarrassing stuff on that one. So this is the edited version of my personal plan. is to go through one, I identified what my values were. So in this case, my values that I wanted to focus on were personal development, fun and enjoyment, career and profession, community, and family. So I said, all right, what do I want to get done in 2020 in order to impact that? So I just highlighted this here. If I go back, that I'm just turning it 90 degrees so you can see it, so you don't have to turn your head like this. So for my goals for 2020 was to get Joint Pivot up and running and meeting our business targets, to add at least one additional service to Joint Pivot offerings, to volunteer at least 24 hours at the Humane Society, to become part of a board or for a nonprofit that moves me, and to golf at least once a week with my husband from mid-May through mid-October, to be available and present for my dogs, and then to find a coach and then actively participate in that coaching process. So those were my goals, or those are my goals for 2020. So if I go back here, you can see then the action items that I need to get done. And this is just abbreviated view, because if you know me, you know I have like 25 action items going at one time. So this is just a few of them. So you can see the relationship there, of working the love train at the Humane Society at least once a month, doing the webinar series for Joint Pivot, completing my IPAC coaching certificate, reaching out to at least 5 local nonprofits, to block off 1 hour or 1 2-hour morning slot and 1 2-hour evening slot each week to golf 9 holes, and then to set up parameters and calendar blocks in my own calendar that allow for me to have some flexibility in my work-life balance. So if I were to take an example here, let's take one, my fun and enjoyment value, because I'm awful at that one because I am all business all the time. So fun and enjoyment, it has a strong impact on getting Joint Pivot up and running because I do find this fun. Volunteering for my hours at the Humane Society, that's fun and enjoyment to me as well. And then the golfing, the being with my dogs, and then finding a coach. Those were all things that were fun. So I know for me, when I go through this, that was a big one to try and get done, because that is so intricately tied to so many of my goals that I know it's going to have a big impact on my value. Now, if I look at this and I say, oh, shoot, I don't have anything impacting one of these values, I know I need to go back and look at my goals to make sure that I've got some sort of goal that is impacting each of my values every single year. And then if I go look at my action items and I say, let's say completing my IPAC coaching certificate, that's going to help get Joint Pivot up and running. It's going to help add at least one additional service to the Joint Pivot offerings. It's going to also be strong to help me find a coach and participate actively, because there's a very strong mentor and peer coach component to that, where I get coached weekly right now, and I'll have about, I think, 24 hours of coaching done, somebody coaching me by the time I'm done with the program. And then also getting my coaching certification completed, I put it as a mild correlation of being available and present for my dogs, because it was, as part of this process, it's actually helped me figure out how to reorganize some of the things in my life so that I am more available for the things that mean something to me, instead of always doing something for others in those cases and carving out time for myself. So it did help me go through and identify where each of these action items, if I had to focus on a couple of them, maybe I had to prioritize, it helped me identify where the strongest relationships were, and it helped me figure out which ones were most important. Then I also looked, if I jump to here, at the different metrics that I'm monitoring. So of course, it's no surprise to many of you, I have a dashboard for my own life that includes the number of hours that I volunteered at the Humane Society, the number of meetings that I've completed with nonprofit opportunities, the business targets that we have, 90% of them need to be at green. I also keep track of my number of golf rounds that I've completed. I have in there the number of vet appointments attended. That one is particularly important for me because I have had 3 senior dogs. I've got the 1 senior dog left, but for 2 of them, I wasn't really available a lot for their last appointments, and I feel horrible about that. So I'm actually targeting that for the one older dog that I do have left, and then the 2 young ones that I have to make sure that I'm available, so that 80% of their vet appointments that I am at, it's not the responsibility of my husband. And then also monitoring the number of additional services that we at Joint Pivot offer, so that I know from a metrics perspective how much of an impact I'm having on my action items, which impacts my goals, which impacts my values. And then I actually did this one for 2 years out. So I'll just jump back here. You can see when I'll be working on them from each quarter. So you can kind of see which quarters are busy, which ones I'm working on all of the time, and where things get slotted. So I have a better understanding of what I have available time in my life. I'll just jump through that. So the lessons that we learned here. One, stay open-minded in it. I know it looks scary, but keep your mind open and just try it and see. And if you've got questions, give us a call. Two, to give it a chance. It's that open-mindedness. Help others through it. Help them give it a chance as well. And don't let them shut it out right away. Walk and work through the process, trust the process, and it won't be as scary as you think it might look right now. Again, be confident about it, provide examples to people. You can steal my personal one in there. I put that in there very specifically for you guys to be able to take. It's also in the Excel document, so you can take a look at it. Maybe you can change it to something that means more to you. You can put together your own personal plan, and then make it timely and start planning now. So again, don't make it a one-time thing. You want to make sure that this is something that you pull out regularly. I look at mine once a month to make sure that I'm making progress on it. Have the team leaders share it, share their matrix, have the leaders share it amongst themselves, have the individuals share it amongst themselves. Review it at least quarterly to make sure that you're making progress on it. Like I said, I like to do it every month. Sometimes I look at it twice a month when I update my metrics. I'm not surprised. If you know me, you know that it's laminated. So I have it laminated with check boxes on it. And then share it. If you're using this in a business environment, make sure that you are putting these out in a central location to share. I actually have mine printed and it's up on my wall up over here so that I know that I'm making progress on it. It's constantly hitting me in the face. When I did have a larger team, we had these printed on like big architectural paper, and everybody knew. They were all on board with whatever that strategy was for the entire year, and we updated our matrix quite often and refreshed it. And then make the pinwheel your own. If you don't want to call it a pinwheel, figure out something else to call it. If you have a different name for it, have at it. I'm not picky if you call it Hoshin Kanri X Matrix. Whatever it is, make it work for you in these cases. Oops. So if you've got questions, let us know. We've got a lot of examples on this. Jen and I are here to help. I actually do have coaching sessions to do introductory sessions with as part of my IPEC certification program. My own goal is to be able to do 10 introductions, 10 free introductions into coaching for at least 1 hour. So if you are interested in being one of those 1 hour people who want to try it out to see if it fits, and you're willing to let me practice my coaching skills on you, reach out to me because I have to get those done by September, and I'd love to have you help me get that checkbox on my X matrix. That would be fantastic. And then Jen and I have tons of experience on strategic planning and on using this X matrix or picking out pieces of it that particularly speak to you and making something brand new out of it. Maybe you hate the way that it looks and we can figure out a different way to make it visually easier for you. Jen and I are great at taking it those ways.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've got any questions, Jen and I will be sticking around here for a couple minutes. Feel free to use the chat box, use the Q&A, or follow up with us via email or give me a call, whatever you need to. We'll be around. And again, you'll be getting an email later today with a link to this recording, a copy of the presentation, and an Excel template that has your own empty spot for you to put in your own plans. And I would love to see all the fun stuff you guys are doing with it. Jen, any final comments today?
No, I just want to repeat, don't freak out at the template. It looks super busy. But exactly as Julie said, one side, one cell at a time. And it doesn't have to be perfect, right? Just do it.
Exactly. Nothing is perfect. And even if it is not perfect, nobody's going to know if you're confident about it. I love it. Awesome. Well, we'll stick around for just a little bit. If you've got any questions, feel free to throw those in the chat or in the Q&A box. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a really great Wednesday afternoon and stay safe out there.
Thank you all. It was fun.
Yes, thank you.
Full of you in the chat box today.
There's so many wonderful familiar faces out there. Oh, you guys are also welcome. All right, we are good to go, Jen, I think.
Okay,
All
awesome.
right, sounds good. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.